All right, looking at percent. First thing we need to pay attention to is the definition. The definition is the number of parts per 100. Number of parts per 100. So looking at 25%, then that's this many parts per 100 parts. So percentage is the number of parts per 100. All right, look at the next one. 12.5%. Okay, that means there are 12 and 1/2 parts per every 100 parts. Now think of it as a ratio. It's the ratio of 12.5 parts to 100 parts. Another way you can write this is 1/2 is the same thing in decimals as 0.5. So it could be 12.5 parts to 100. So looking at percentages, what we'll use in percentages when we have fractions over here, most of the time we'll want to change that to a decimal and then work with it. So 12.5% is the same thing as 0.125. In other words, if I divided 100 of this, I would get that. All right, let's look at the next one. 125%. 125% means that we have 125 parts to 100 parts. The ratio of 125 parts to 100 parts. Okay, now let's look at the next part of the notes, and it says, simple deal, it says, let's just change percents to decimals. Change percents to decimals. Simple little rule. It says, move the decimal place from where it presently is. Now, if the problem's written this way, the decimal place is at the end of the number. If there's no decimal in the problem, then the decimal is at the end of the number. So if I move the decimal place 2 places to the left, then that changes 25% to 0.25. And that's all there is to it. Let me show you why briefly, and the rest of them we'll just do the mechanical work. 25% is the same thing as 25 parts is to 100. So if I do 100 divided into 25, I get 0.25. So if you divide that into there, that's how you get that. So, but the mechanical method is just take this and move it 2 places. All right, so looking at the B part, 5%, here's where the decimal is. So if I move that 2 places, oops, I got to put a 0 in front of it, then put the decimal. So that's 0.05. All right, the C part, 135%, here's where the decimal is to start with. So if I move it 2 places, then the answer is 0.35. 1.35. D part, 0.75%. Well, the decimal place is shown to be right here. So from here, we move it 2 places. And so therefore, we have to add 2 zeros. So the answer is 0.0075. All right, now let's look at a few that are a little more complicated in the work. Doesn't change the rule, doesn't make it any more difficult, but to set it to start with, before we use the rule, we have to know a few things. First of all, 1/5. What is that as a decimal? So what we'll do is change that to 0.2. Still percent. So 1/5 is 0.2. Now the way you do that, you divide 5 into 1. Okay, that's how you change fractions to decimals, which is on another tape. Now that we have that change to decimals, And now we move the decimal place 2 places. So we have to add a 0 in front, and therefore the answer is 0.032. All right, F part, 12.5%. First thing we do is change the fraction to a decimal, keep the percent sign, and now we move the decimal place 2 places, and so our answer is 0.125. All right, now look at 33, G part, 33 1/3 percent. Well, 33 point 1/3 is 0.33333. So if I move the decimal place 2 places, the answer is 0.33333. What is that equal to? What's the decimal 0.13333? It's equal to 1/3, the fraction. The fraction 1/3 is 0.3333. So 1/3 of a whole is 33 1/3 percent. Okay, let's look at number 2. Changing decimals back to percent. Say we're giving a decimal and we have to find what the percent is. Now all this is necessary to learn so that we can be able to work the stated problems later on in this set. Okay, to change decimals to percent, we move the decimal place the other direction. So we'll move it 2 places to the right. And then tag on the word or symbol percent. Okay, here we move the decimal place 2 places to the right, and we have 128%. Okay, here we move the decimal place 2 places to the right. Well, we need to add a 0. So that's 30%. The D part, if we move the decimal place 2 places to the right, we get 15%. Real simple ideas, but make sure you get them down so that when we go into more complicated problems, you're not struggling with the idea. All right, let's look at the E part. Here we have 0.015, and we want to change it to percent. So we move the decimal place 2 places. Tag on the word percent. Okay, but a lot of people will not leave that as a decimal percent. Most people will take the decimal part now and change that to a fraction. So that's 1 1/2%. 0.5 is the same thing as 1/2. Right, so know that, so that, you know, when you're looking at answers or you're looking at answers in the back of the book for your homework or on a test, they're liable to write it this way for an answer, and you need to understand that's the same thing. All right, the F part, we move the decimal place 2 places, and we come out with 0.5%. Again, when you have the symbol percent, you want to keep that, and you have a decimal over here, you change the decimal part to a fraction, so that's 0.5%. Okay, let's look at G. Change 1/3. That's a number. Change it to percent. So what we must do then is to divide that out. In other words, divide 3 into that, or remember that 1/3 is 0.3333, keeps on going. So what we're saying is that we take a fraction, change it into a decimal, and then move the decimal 2 places, so the answer is percent. But wait a minute, we don't leave percents with decimals. So what's 0.33333? That's 1/3. So we get 33 1/3%, just like the problem we previously worked, the G part of the part 1. Okay, 2/5. How do we change that to percent? Well, first we got to divide. So we divide 5 into 2, 0.4. So it's 0.4, so we move the decimal place 2 places and get 40%. Okay, now let's next look at changing fractions to percent. In other words, this is what I've just done in this H part here. What I want to do now is to show you and talk more about what I was trying to show you here. All right? Okay, number 3, what we're doing is changing fractions to decimals and then maybe to percent if we need to. Okay. All right, so 3/4. So what we do then is we take and divide the denominator into the numerator. All right, so 3 won't go into that. Decimal goes above decimal. That will go, what, 7 times, which is 28. Dividing that's 2, 0. 4 going to that 5. And so we stop there, and so that's 0.75. So changing the fraction to the decimal, and then our last step then is to change it to percent. So 0.75 changed to percent is to move the decimal place 2 places to the right and add on the percent sign. So 3/4 is the same thing as 75%. 75%. All right, let's take the next one, 5/12, and see what it is changed to percent. So we take 12, divide it into 5. Okay, that'll go about 4 times, and that's 48. Bring down the 2, and that'll go 1 time, and that's 12, and bring down the 8. Bring down a 0, and that'll go about 6 times, and that's 72, and that's 8, and we start getting repeating. Okay, so what we get is 0.416 repeated. All right, so let's see what that is. Then that means move the decimal place 2 places to the right, so that's 41.66 repeats percent. Okay, now remember that we do not want to write percentages with decimals, so we go back and figure out what 6.6666 is. Well, remembering right here it was 8 over 12. The remainder of 8, and our divisor was 12. So we reduce that, and that's 2/3. So what 0.666 is 41 2/3%. All right, look at the C part. What do we do now about mixed number? So we multiply this times that. 2 times 8 is 16, plus 7 is 23/8. So what we do is divide 8 into 23. Okay, decimal place goes above decimal place. 8 will go into this 2 times, so that's 16. Subtracting, we get 7. 8 will go into 70 about 8 times. That's 64. That's 6. 8 will go into 60 about 7 times, and that's 56. Bring down the 0. 8 will go into 45 times, and it stops. So our number is 2.875, decimal number. So if we change it to a percentage, we move the decimal place 2 places, and so it's 287.5%. But again, remembering, we do not write percentages with decimals most of the time, and so the 0.5 then becomes 287.5%. All right. right, now let's look at what all this is for. All right. So let's look at number 4 in your notes. It says the general formula for finding the percent of a number is percent over 100 is equal to, and then have right here the word is and the word of. In the problem, if you'll notice that the part A right there below the statement, it says 40% of 186 is what number? Okay, so the of 186, the 186 goes where the word of is, and then this x goes where the word is. And then, of course, the 40 is going to go where the percent is, and you write down the 100. So what I'm saying this is and of is when you read these sentences, 40% of 186, well, then 186 goes where this of is. And then where it says is something, whatever follows that, okay, becomes what the word is. So it makes this problem real simple. 40% of 186 is what number? Well, 40 goes over the 100. The 186 is the of, so it goes down here. And we're looking for what number, so we put an unknown letter there. And now we cross multiply. To solve proportions, we cross multiply. It's 100x is equal this times this is 0, 24 karma 2, 34 karma 3, 74, 40. Okay, now to solve for x, I divide both sides by 100. And so x is equal to 74.4. And that's the answer to 40% of 186 is what number? Now, I want to show you another way of doing this. This is the way I think most people explain how to solve these kind of problems. But I think there's another way of doing it that's just as good, and sometimes it's a little shorter method. And that's this. The word of is multiplication, and the word is equal. So you can say 40%. Now I've got to change it to decimals. Times, the word of is times, 186 is what number? So wherever the word of is, you put a multiplication sign, and I'm going to do this, put this as a multiplication sign since I have an x over here. And then where the word is an equal sign. And so what this says, just go multiply that together, and you get 74.4, and you get the answer. Okay, let's go to the next one, number B, the B part of number 4. How much is 15% of 52? Okay, well, let's see. That means the 15 goes over the 100, percent over the 100. The word is, how much is, so that's going to be there. And the word of is 52. Okay, cross multiplying is 100x. Cross multiplying here, we get, what, 780? So now dividing by 100, we get x is equal to 7.8. Okay? Now the other way of working this is this method. How much is, so that's equal, 15% times 52. The word of means times. Decimal, when you change percent over to numbers, you move the decimal place 2 places. The word is equal, and so you get x. So you multiply that together, and you get the 7.8 that we got previously. Okay, let's look at the C part. It says 64 is 20% of x. Well, let's do it my shortcut method first. That would be simply 64 equals, the word is, 0.20 times x. So there's your equation. Now, to solve for x, you divide by 0.20. Divide by 0.20. And what you get here is 320. Okay, so it's a pretty easy way of doing just percent problems. The word is an equal sign. The word of is multiplication. And then whichever part is missing out of this, you put the letter for it. Okay. All right, the other way of doing it is, okay, let's see, percent. So the 20 goes here over the 100. And then the 64 is, so that goes what, on the top? And the of goes on the bottom. Cross multiplying, we get 20x. Multiplying here, we get 6,400. Now, dividing both sides by 20, we still get the 320. Okay, let's look at a few more examples. Okay, part D. 125% of what number is 527? 100% of what number is 527? All right, staying by our rule then, that would be put the 125 over the 100. And then over here, what do we put? We put the word is at top. So that would be 527. And of on the bottom. Okay, so cross multiplying is 125. X is equal to 52700. Now dividing both sides by what is times the x. And so we get x to end up being 421.6. All right. Now, we could do it the other way, the shortcut method, or my method, or whatever you want to call it. Let's see what we'd have there. All right. If we took that one, then it's 1.25, changing percent to decimal, of, so that's times, x, what number? 100% of what number is 527. So we divide both sides with 1.25, and x then is the same answer, 421.6. Okay, let's look at the E part. On the E part now it says, what percent of 126 is 110.25? What percent? That means we're looking for then the part that's over the 100. Okay, remembering the percent over the 100 is equal to, okay, is 110.25 over the of. Cross multiplying, we get 126x, and here we get 110.50. So then we divide both sides by 126, and so x comes out to be, okay, 87.5%. Now, this is one nice thing about this rule, is remembering now, whatever you get for x is the answer. You don't move decimals. That's the answer. Whatever you get up here for x represents the percent. So when you divide this by this, you get 87.5%. Now, however, with my method of using it, you have to move the decimal. That's somewhere you have to be aware of that. Now, it would be what percent of 126 is equal to 110.25. Now, you divide both sides by 126 and you get x is equal to 0.875. So when you work it this way, you've got to realize that this is the number, the decimal number, And so when you want to change the answer to percent, you got to move it 2 places. And so you still get 87.5%. Okay, now the F part. It says 400 is what percent of 125? Well, let's see. Use our deal here. What percent? So we don't know what percent it is, so we'll put an X there. The word of is 125. This, of course, is 100. And 400 is the is. Cross multiplying, we get 125x is equal to 4000. So solve for x, we divide by what's times it. And so x comes out to be 320, I believe. Now remember, using this process, that's the answer. That is the answer to percent. You just write down, put the percent sign on that answer, and you have the correct answer to it. All right, this concludes in the tape on percent. This shows you how to change from one to the other and vice versa, and then how to kind of work problems that deal with percent. You now need to work the problems in the end of the set of notes.